Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to talk to you about building this 8x10 metal shed by Arrow that we purchased from Home Depot for $400. Our intention was to use it as a chicken coop and it came out pretty good. So several years ago we purchased this Producer's Pride Defender chicken coop from Tractor Supply. Now this thing worked out great when my mom had a few chickens, but she has since increased her flock and that causes some problems with this small space. The other problem is I don't live nearby, so I couldn't maintain all of the wood and the structure on it as it rotted out. It's been a pretty good chicken coop though, and if you live nearby it and you're handy with woodworking and whatnot, then it's great. I would get it, especially if you just have a few chickens. They're $1,200 at Tractor Supply. And this is what you can expect if you buy that chicken coop from Tractor Supply. It's a pretty big project. Now, unfortunately for all of you, I just don't have time to do one of those unboxing fetish videos. All you really need to know is that the box was in great shape, everything was in it, and they weigh about 215 pounds, so be ready for that. Okay, now for the fun stuff. Just so you know, this project took me about 2.5 days to complete. So my first day was just a half day, and I spent it unboxing everything, laying it out nice and neat, and then completing the items on pages 14 through 17, 23, and page 30. These are the floor frames, the roof beams, and the wall channels from pages 14 through 17. Assembling them was really easy. You will notice during this project that a lot of these parts are exactly the same, so it doesn't really matter which one you put on one end versus the other. I recommend overlapping everything the way the manual shows you just to be safe. Okay, now for these roof gables. Let me caution you that I drew more blood handling these than I did any other parts. It does tell you to put the edge trim on the gables at this point, but you will have to tape them down in order for them to stay there. Just so you know, if you do put the edge trim on now, it will interfere with you putting screws through the upper holes whenever you assemble the shed. Here you can see I've put the roof beam brackets on, but I just barely tighten them enough so that I can still slide them around with my hand during assembly. And finally, you'll notice that the bottom edge of the gables isn't quite bent 90 degrees, even though they look like they are in the manual. I can tell you that they are meant to be that way, so just assemble it and you will see. I drew blood 3 times handling these, so be careful. If you're going to spend the first day pre-assembling everything like I did, I suggest you go to page 30 and do the doors as well. Keep in mind that a lot of the parts that you use to build the doors are also ambidextrous, so make sure to build a left and a right door, and also take care because the metal is flimsy until you have all the channels installed. Even though your base will most likely not be like what I did, I used the dimensions nonetheless that the manual provided, and they worked out very well. Due to the nature of our project and time constraints, I chose to build a base like this. For the basic frame, I used treated 2x4s and treated 4x4s. Since the manual says not to put treated wood against the metal shed, I chose to use untreated 1x5s to cap the frame off. I also made sure that if I needed to replace these 1x5s at any time, that it was a fairly easy task as well. I made sure that my base was as square as possible, which helped me a lot in keeping the shed square while I was assembling it. In case you're wondering why I built a base that just sits on top of pavers, the main reason is underneath that topsoil is nothing but rock, and there's just no digging into it. When it's time to start building your shed, you are definitely going to need a second person. The manual tells you not to build this shed if there's any kind of wind. Unfortunately, I did not have that option, and it was a real pain in the butt. When you start assembling the walls, pay close attention to step 3 on page 20. The 88-39 sidewall angles need to overlap the upper rear wall channel. This detail is pointing to the mid rear wall channel, but it's the upper one that's important. When you're installing the rear roof gables, the very end of them will need to slide underneath this overlap. Despite the 10-mile-an-hour winds, and with the help of my wonderful mother, we managed to get all of the walls up at the end of the second day without bending anything out of shape. Thankfully, the top of the shed was really level at this point. When you start assembling the gables, just keep in mind you have 2 66-35 gable braces. You will need to install one of these on the front and back gables. In the front, you'll sandwich the two gable halves with the 6635 gable brace using those track supports that are 6228. Also, be sure to only put the bolts in the holes shown, as later you'll need those upper holes for the roof beams. When you're installing the outer roof beams, you'll need to pay attention that you match the upper angle of the roof beams with the slope of the roof. You can definitely put these in facing the wrong direction. Just like the roof beam brackets and the gables, when I installed these roof beams, I just did everything hand tight so they could move a little bit for when I put the roof panels on. Thankfully, my shed stayed pretty square while I was building it, so all of my roof panel holes lined up with the roof beam holes, and it wasn't really necessary. Just so you know, in all of the panels, the screw holes are big enough that you have a lot of wiggle room to pick up the holes underneath them. I chose to lay out my roof panels on the ground just like the diagram in step 1. If you choose to do this, be aware that if there's any wind, it's going to pick them up and toss them around. In the step 1 diagram, the numbers in the middle of the panels are the order in which you should install them. You're definitely going to need a ladder that allows a good portion of your body to be above the roof line while you're installing these roof panels. When you're installing the wider roof panels, remember, do not put any weight anywhere on those panels or you will easily bend them. When installing these wide roof panels, you're going to need to reach the far side of them to install bolts and screws. All you have to do to accomplish this is stand high on your ladder and roll the edge of the roof panel up, and you'll be able to reach them without any problem. You should still have a second person inside the shed holding all of the nuts with a wrench while you tighten them from above. Once I had all of the roof panels in place, I went back inside of the shed and tightened all the hardware up for the roof beams. Be sure to install the rear ridge cap when you get all but the last 2 panels on. You should be able to reach those first 2 bolts from above without much problem.
All right, there it is. That's about 2.5 days worth of work, but it's complete. Everything was perfect. All the holes everywhere lined up great. I made sure this thing was square as I was building it, and it went good. I bled a lot, but it was just little flesh wounds here and there. So I'll take you inside. The doors, they hung really easy, and unlike the Home Depot ones, they slide open easy. So this is going to be a chicken coop. We got some more work to do on it on the inside here, and some protection on the lower edge. The ground out here is horribly uneven, so we just deal with it like we always do. Drop some chicken wire and pile up rocks, and they'll be okay. I'll give you some close-up details in case you're wondering how my hardware went. I followed the instructions to the letter. They're really good. If you miss something, it's just probably because you're a knucklehead. You'll see that it just gets this one little bracket in the back. But on the front, you have this whole thing you got to assemble up here. So have fun with that. That was probably one of the most annoying things, getting this back bolt in, or I guess let's just say forward bolt. These gables, when you install them, they tilt outward, and I guess that's normal. That all pulls in together. I left all the hardware on these beams completely loose, just hand tight until this whole roof was on. And then I came back and tightened them all up, and I didn't have any problems. Everything up top lined up great. Make sure that you overlap this like this. This aft frame here needs to go below this one on both sides, because this gable has to go underneath the side one on both sides. It'll tell you to install this thing with just one screw for now. And as you put the sidewalls up, you'll install 2 screws for the roof and here, everywhere where they overlap. See the sliders? Just little plastic blocks. I put mine in all of the middle holes, and the doors are great. So my mom's plan is to have her roosting poles over here all along this side because she has nearly 20 chickens. Then she'll have their nesting boxes in this corner. And then over here she'll have her big cans of feed. And we were thinking about cutting a door for the chickens to come in and out of their cage from the other side, but turns out we're just going to leave the bottom open where it opens at the cage and let them just come in and out that way. It's a time saver. Anyway, I hope this helps anybody else. Before I forget, this is how much hardware that we had left over. I promise you everything is done that the instructions said. So we have a surplus. And just so you know, after I got done, I anchored the shed to my frame with these screws. They're sheet metal to wood screws. So I just put one every so often, and they will go under the door frames without interfering with the door. And then of course all of this will be anchored down in other ways as well. We'll come out here and get some views into the sun. I couldn't believe how square and easy this thing was to build. It's just really time consuming. But I would say building that frame down there and the shed took me about 2.5 days. With a little bit of help from my mother here and there, holding a nut on a screw for me, handing me things. But otherwise, it was pretty straightforward. Good luck. All right, pardon the wind. We finally got everything wrapped up to the point where I can go back home now. So we got these bars put in here for them to roost on at night. We'll do a better job later, but we just ran out of time. And then some temporary nesting boxes put up here.
So this is the finished product. And I'm happy to report that not only are the chickens in there laying nice clean eggs, but this thing has already gone through its first crazy windstorm without moving an inch. Hopefully soon we'll be able to build some better roosting poles, nesting boxes, and get some storage in this thing, as well as figure out how we're going to keep it cool during the summer months. Now, obviously, I didn't go through the whole manual here, but if you somehow found this video and have a question, just let me know and I will get to you as soon as I can. And as usual, thanks for watching.